In your own words, can you explain to us exactly at what moment you started to realize that you were being censored and that the editors were not really looking at the facts, but they were trying to suppress a news story? I know you've spoken about it before on other shows, but for our audience, I want you to explain that moment and what was going through your head.
Sure. So I was writing other stories as I do. I'm very often I'm writing about foreign affairs or Syria. I was doing some other stories about chemical weapons. Turkey allegedly used chemical weapons in northern Syria, so I was investigating this, and that's when I started to hear kind of stories about what was going on at the OPCW, and started to hear about whistleblowers, as I'm sure you've all heard. So as I started following the story, obviously as a journalist, there's always a threshold that I kind of need to reach before I can go to my editors and say this is a worthwhile story. I can't just say, oh, I've seen this in a leaflet or whatever. It has to be, the sources have to be solid, and especially if it's something as controversial as the UN's chemical weapons body issuing fake reports. But late November, I reached the point that enough evidence was there. So a letter was published in the Mail on Sunday, verified by Reuters, and obviously released by WikiLeaks in 4 stages so far. So yeah, it was when I had evidence that I believed was journalistically sound that I thought I can approach my editors. I did so, and they tried to essentially smear the sources of information of where it came from instead of kind of actually looking at the facts. So the Mail on Sunday was smeared as a publication because, well, I'm sure you guys in America all know Mail Online. And they have a slightly bad reputation journalistically. But like I've said before, what I think most people don't realize is that they have a newspaper which is actually still very good, even though a lot of people might disagree with their politics. But from a journalism point of view and journalism standards point of view, it's still a good newspaper. So it was published in that newspaper. It was verified by Reuters, which is like the gold standard of facts usually of journalism. So even though we can criticize Reuters as well, but yeah. So I was those places were smeared. I kept pushing, and then I was given a refutation by Bellingcat, which is, I think, important for people to understand. Essentially, their founder, Elliot Higgins, was essentially a professional troll. He was a moderator on a forum called somethingawful.com. I'm not sure at which point, but that he was a research fellow at the Atlantic Council, which is a think tank that has been set up to essentially, it's the military kind of wing of, or military think tank of NATO. So it's funded by NATO, it's funded by the US government. The same Atlantic Council, actually, funnily enough, so aside from doing these projects with Bellingcat, it's also partnering with Facebook News to the Atlantic Council are contributing to what news sources are going to be considered worthwhile or not. So it's kind of this two-pronged approach where you have Bellingcat producing these kind of ready-made, essentially fake news stories, and then the list of accepted publications, which anything alternative will get left off that list, and those accepted publications will pretty much parrot what the Bellingcat line is.